Yesterday, we talked about Jameson Williams, former Ohio State Buckeye wide receiver who had entered his name into the transfer portal, and we talked yesterday about how it was an absolute possibility that he ended up with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Not only did I think it made sense, but a crystal ball was put in for it to happen. And less than 24 hours after that video is out, news breaks that he will be rolling with the Tide, and we have got to take a dive into this. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all, so hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you excited that Jameson Williams is now a part of the Alabama Crimson Tide class? And let me know what you're thinking there. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification because I do constant college football content and you don't want to miss any of it. And I'm on my push to 5,000 subscribers in my first year, and I'd love to have you along for that journey. And if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and comment down below because those interactions are really huge for content creators like myself. But with all that being said, let's talk Jameson Williams. And the first thing I want to talk about is there is a sentiment, and an understandable sentiment, around this that the Alabama Crimson Tide wide receiver room is already so loaded. And it is. This is a wide receiver room that is littered with talent, but doesn't have the experience to go along with the subsequent talent. And Jameson Williams is a guy that possesses speed. He's 6'2". He has a 33-inch vertical. He has a good burst time when you talk about his cone drills, and he offers experience and speed. And the coaching staff was cognizant this offseason that when they'd be in front of the media, especially Nick Saban, he would talk about the need for speed at the wide receiver position. And we've talked about before how even though I think that Leary and Earl will be able to satisfy that, Hall's not slow, Holden's not slow, Mechie's not slow, but Leary and Earl are closer to Jalen Waddle and Henry Ruggs than not. That speed will be able to benefit the Tide. The problem is those are young guys. Those are guys that still need experience. Leary not able to play in the spring game, but having a productive spring practice from everything we heard. And Earl, a guy who I've been adamant about that I think is just going to come in there and steal minutes from people. He's going to be taking time. He wasn't able to come in the spring, so he's going to be a summer enrollee, so he doesn't get the benefit of those early reps. Jameson Williams has size, has speed, and has college football experience. And the coaching staff kept talking about it. So if the coaching staff kept talking about that they needed speed and then were interested in a transfer, they saw something that they wanted. They saw something that could benefit the Alabama Crimson Tide. And at the end of the day, we need to trust in Sir Nick Saban because he hasn't steered the ship wrong yet. And if this is something that he deems going to benefit the Tide, I don't see how it couldn't. And we're really going to dive deep into that because one of the biggest things with Jameson Williams, in my opinion, aside from him having a 4.4 40, and I've heard as low as 4.3, but I found a lot of verified 4.4 flats at Ohio State to go along with that 33-inch vertical and impressive shuttle and cone times. That's all incredibly impressive. But what's more impressive is his ability to play outside or inside. He's going to give the Crimson Tide a ton of flexibility along that wide receiver room, which is going to allow for other players to be able to come in and get meaningful reps because he doesn't have to be relegated to just one position along the line of scrimmage. He can move around. He can play inside. He can play outside. I don't believe he'll be getting many reps, if at all, at wide receiver X. I believe that's going to be John Mechie's. And look, when we're talking John Mechie, I said this yesterday, but I really do believe that this needs to be said anytime we're talking John Mechie, because John Mechie, I don't feel gets the credit he's due. He's a guy who, in between Jalen Waddle starting so hot to last season, and then Devontae Smith finishing with an all-time historic season, John Mechie still went out there and was less than 100 yards away from a 1,000-yard season. Even with Jalen Waddle starting so well, Devontae Smith finishing so well, and the way the Alabama offense was predicated, he still almost had 1,000 yards. So I absolutely expect him to break 1,000 yards this season because he has that ability. So I don't expect for Williams to get playing time at X because I think Mechie would be there, but I think we also need to understand that the Crimson Tide staff could do some things to move Mechie around the field as well, to move him into positions to just attack defenses. And that's the other part with Williams. Because he's so flexible, you can use him as a piece to attack defenses to not only spring open things for Mechie, for Baker, for Earl, for Leary, for Bolden, whoever else along the wide receiver front, but also for your running backs, for Brian Robinson, Jefferson, for Jace McClellan. If things get bad, Bryce Young can bail. That flexibility for him to be able to attack defenders along the line of scrimmage and really be a chess piece is going to be huge for the Alabama Crimson Tide, because that's what they were able to do with a lot of the receivers they've had the past few years. Aside from them being incredibly talented, they were being able to be used as chess pieces because they were just better and they were so flexible. And Jameson Williams, I think, is going to benefit from Wiggins. He's going to do great work. I think that they're going to have a really productive season. I hope so, at least. And I'm very interested to see if this flexibility really is going to be used, because in theory, at least, he is a very flexible wide receiver at where you can put him along the line of scrimmage, which makes it very difficult for a defense to be able to truly attack you, because you always kind of have an ace up your sleeve. Now pair that with another ace such as Leary, such as Earl, such as Mechie, and you can see why the Alabama Crimson Tide staff looked at a guy like Jameson Williams at 6'2", 4'4", and a 33-inch vertical and said, yeah, we want you to come in here and help out this wide receiver room because you have experience. The younger guys can learn from you. And before we move on to the last thing that I really like about this, something that I touched on yesterday, I think the other thing we need to remember is this isn't last year. The Alabama Crimson Tide didn't have a non-conference schedule last year, so younger guys didn't get the benefit of playing some of those games where they would get increased reps. That's not going to be the case this year. So even if Jameson Williams comes in, the younger guys for the Crimson Tide are still going to be able to get meaningful reps because the schedules are going more back to normal. Because of that, it's not going to be as big of a deal, but still, this is an absolutely loaded wide receiver room. The other thing I really like about this is what this does on the recruiting trail. One, I like what it does for Wiggins, because now he gets to go onto the recruiting trail and say, look, I just pulled a speedster. I'm really excited to get this guy in. And especially if Jameson Williams comes into Alabama and balls out, that's going to be a huge, huge chip for Wiggins to be able to use. The other thing I really like about this as it pertains to recruiting is he's from St. Louis, Missouri, the number 1 wide receiver in the nation for the class of 2022, and the number 2 wide receiver in the nation in the class of 2022 are both from St. Louis, Missouri. And even though I can't confirm this with certainty, I have heard that Williams in some way, in some capacity, has a relationship with Luther Burden. Whether their families know each other, whether they've known each other growing up, I'm not sure, but I have heard that Jameson Williams knows Luther Burden and they're familiar with each other in some capacity. That could prove to be big for these visits when we have Luther Burden, when we have Kevin Coleman coming on campus, and now they have a guy that can kind of talk to them, telling them what Alabama has to offer relative to another huge institution in Ohio State, and then he can talk to them on a deeper level because he's familiar with where they come from. That right there is something I really, really like. That's something that I think could prove big in the dividends for Crimson Tide recruiting. This is going to be a very, very interesting move, because this is someone who adds in a ton of speed, who adds in flexibility, and we heard Nick Saban talk about the need for speed in this wide receiving core. Even though we think it'll be fixed, we don't know. And even if we know it will be fixed with guys such as Leary and Earl, we also know that they don't have the experience at the college football level. Talent is amazing, but guys still have to learn. There is a learning curve because college football might as well be a different game than high school football. And I think, and I have every reason to believe, Leary and Earl are going to pick it up and just be awesome. It is always great to get some experience in there, because that right there cannot be denied. I'm really interested to see what y'all are thinking. Hop down to the comments. Let me know. The last thing I will say before I put this to bed, I have heard people asking me, well, why didn't he play at Ohio State? Ohio State has recruited the wide receiver position as good as anybody in the nation, and sometimes you just get buried in a room and a change of scenery is necessary. Sometimes you can really benefit from that change of scenery, and it'll be best for everybody. And I think this is absolutely one of those times. I'm really interested to hear what y'all think. Hop down to the comments. Let me know. That's it. See ya.